Hello again, I'm Robert Fifth, and welcome back to 1983. I've been living here for quite a while now, and if you need a break from current times, well, come back and join me. Here I am, still in 1983, still in May of 1983, specifically still in May 25th of 1983. And doing the deep dive into that year, chronologically reviewing all of these albums, so I'm going to get right back to it. Another Perfect Day is another great Motorhead album, and this one released on May the 25th. Yeah, Lemmy and Company just doing their thing with Motorhead. I mean, you know you're going to get a great album when it's a Motorhead album. Each of them kind of sound a little bit different. They have their own little flourishes going on. And this one is, of course, 1983. They've got a new guitarist, well, new to them anyway, previously with Thin Lizzy, Brian Robertson, or known as Robbo to the cool kids. He has joined the band. Fast Eddie is gone. And so that definitely changes up the sound a little bit for Another Perfect Day. This one, the guitar in here is a little more melodic. You can especially hear that in tracks like Dancing on Your Grave. You get that in there. That kind of goes throughout the album, but it's especially on there. You know that you're not listening to Motorhead from a previous album. You know this is a different kind of direction they're going in with the melodic guitar going on there. So it's a different guitar sound, and Lemmy's vocals for some reason are mixed down in this. He's harder to hear in this, and it's Lemmy Kilmister. He's the voice of Motorhead. That is the main distinguishing factor of a Motorhead song. Is as soon as his vocals come on, you know exactly what band this is. And so they're mixed down a little bit in this, which I'm not a big fan of that. They got a little bit of the piano going in that would come on later albums, like those ones from the early 90s I talked about in my 90s series. It's just creeping up here, especially in the song Rocket. You get this little ding, 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 ding piano where it's used more like a percussion instrument. Just like Lemmy's vocals, though, it's pretty much buried in the mix, so you don't hear it a lot. Nice little kind of a seasoning in there. It doesn't overtake it or anything and make them sound like some sort of, honky-tonk band or boogie rock band or something like that. It's very, very slight. But it's there. The album in the U.S. is a completely different order, but it's the same songs. But for some reason, they just put them all in different order. Now, I can understand sometimes when, especially in the 80s, in the 70s, this happened all the time, where the U.S. album would be different than the U.K. one because they were released at different times, or the U.K. never put the singles on the albums, which I still don't get that. And so, in the U.S., they would definitely do that. So they would put the hit single on the album and take a track off. And I totally get all that. But I don't get why you would just take an album, release it at the same time in two different countries, and then just rearrange the order of the songs, which the UK one is the one that I have because I have the CD. And this is the original UK order. So it starts off with Back to the Funny Farm, which is great. But the US one starts with One Track Mind, which is at the end of side one of the UK one. In my opinion, where it belongs. It's a slower song, it's kind of plodding, it's definitely not my favorite song on the album, and it's the lead track on the US one, so that's not a good way to lead off an album, especially a Motorhead album with a song like that. I don't get that at all. Both sides of the UK one start with kind of studio chatter, so you know that just the way it flows, you know that the UK one is how it was meant to be, and for some reason the US one is just bastardized and just rearranged for seemingly no reason at all. Last track on here, one of the best titles of any Motorhead song, Die You Bastard. I mean, I already liked the song before I even heard it. I think I first heard this probably back in the early 90s, something like that, maybe 93, 94 when I got this CD. But yeah, Another Perfect Day may not be a perfect Motorhead album. There are definitely better ones, especially with that vocal mix going on in here. And I definitely think that Fast Eddie's guitar goes better with the whole Motorhead motif. But I will give this 4 stars because it's still a Motorhead album. It's still got great tracks on it. It's got some rock and roll on here that's just undeniable, fast and just furious and just, rocking the floorboard of the car as you're just blasting down the road. That is our Motorhead. And so, yeah, 4 stars for Another Perfect Day. Another one from May 25th, 1983 is Marshall Crenshaw and his album called Field Day. Now, Marshall Crenshaw is somebody that, it's another one of those artists where I'd seen the name all the time. I've heard the name. I don't know much about them. And then, I finally get to hear an album. So yeah, all these years I didn't really know. I mean, if you said the name, I'd like, yeah, I think he's got a song called Someday, Some Way or something like that. Shows up on 80s compilations, but that's really all I knew. And I now know that he's from Detroit. I now know what he looks like. He looks like the guy from school that you'd copy the test off of or something. He doesn't look like some big rock star kind of, whatever, or some new wave weirded out, clothes and flashy whatever. He just looks like a dude, which is great, let the music do the talking. But he is definitely more in the pop, kind of more pop leaning than rock, in the pop rock world. He's not power pop. This is full on, very much melody focused pop music, but played by with the rock lineup, the guitar, the bass, the drums, that kind of thing. Sounds a little more like late 70s than it does 1983. But that's great. You need different sounds in there to keep things interesting. But his album sounds pretty much the same throughout. But it's a great sound if this is the kind of music that you're into. Like I said, heavy on melody, very, very, very catchy. Any of these songs on this album, and you can't say this about a lot of albums, just about any of these songs on this album could have been hit singles. I don't know why they weren't. Listen to these songs, especially the very first track on here, Whenever You're on My Mind, whenever you're on my mind. Everything just sounds like the type of thing that radio would grab and just play over and over and over again and just completely wear out. Almost every track on here sounds like that. A lot of them love songs talking about some girl he's all into, and whenever you're on my, every day with you, oh my, I would trade anything for just a day with you. Just everything on here is just, man, I don't know why this was not just an absolute smash album loaded with like 6 hit singles. I don't know who was behind the promotion for this, but they weren't very good at their job, whoever it was, because this thing should have been a huge 80s album instead of something that I'd never heard before and only heard the name a few times and was familiar with one song that's not even on this album. So, yeah, somebody blew it big time promoting this guy. A few of the songs on here remind me of like a junior high dance with the doon 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 doon. It's that kind of thing. There is one annoying song on here with this like tick tock, there goes the clock, what time is it? It's not great. But the rest of the tracks on here, I mean, again, I don't know why these weren't hits. Every single one of them is catchy. It's stellar, hooky pop songwriting. This guy should have been much bigger. Maybe he didn't have the look. Maybe that was the thing. He didn't dress up in the clothes and, whatever. Kind of like a Dave Edmunds, Nick Lowe kind of thing going on. He kind of sounds like one of those guys from England that would do like the power pop stuff. But again, this isn't as much power pop as it is just catchy pop music. So if that's what you're into, check this out. I'll give it 4 stars. It's not something that necessarily I would gravitate towards a lot, but I can appreciate the skill and the songwriting and the playing and the singing and all of this. I don't get why this wasn't a huge hit. I never really had an interest in listening to an entire album with Malcolm McLaren's name on it as credited to him. But in 1983, the album Duck Rock came out. Again, credited to Malcolm McLaren. Now, Malcolm McLaren, as you probably know, was a businessman. He was an entrepreneur, an opportunist. He was a scenester. He kind of, was responsible for the image of punk rock. And, setting up, okay, this is the clothing you want to wear, this is how you want to look, the whole thing with the Sex Pistols and their image and all of that, which I never really cared about that. I only cared about the Sex Pistols music, the great guitar work, the layers of guitar, the production from Chris Thomas, the vocals, Johnny Rotten, and it all just went together really. I don't care about any of the other stuff, even though I do have the spiked hair for this video series. But anyway, he was the guy he was an influencer long before social media took that term. I mean, he was the guy that convinced many people to walk around with their pant legs held together by a strap. So, you got to give it up. But I don't necessarily want to hear his voice. I don't want to hear an album credited to him, and that's what Duck Rock was. But Duck Rock, is, this album is really Trevor Horn and Thomas Dolby and a bunch of other great people, the guys who would later become The Art of Noise, working together to make this just piece of music, just this hodgepodge of different sounds that work together, African music, rap music, which was still kind of new in New York City, and taking on the whole world, and blending all these different sounds together from the Caribbean, a little bit of Italian, a little bit of Spanish in there. There's all these things. It's like a melting pot of all this, and a lot of it really works when Malcolm McLaren's voice is not on it. Those are the tracks that I think are they're terrible. I'm not a big fan of Double Dutch. Him standing there talking about how to jump rope like he's ever been involved in Double Dutch jump rope. He sounds like a wedding DJ or something, just annoying. The other one, the Buffalo Gals, go round the outside. He's just not into it. Those are the skippable tracks for me, and those are the two big songs. So I don't know how those became hits. They're completely annoying. The record scratching, that kind of stupid shit that was going on in 1982 and 83 and definitely 84. I never liked that. But side 2 is really where the fun is. That's where he's like pushed aside. We don't need your MC voice anymore. We're going to take care of the music. And they just let Trevor Horn produced this album. They just let that, let the real people take over, and it really works. A lot of it really works. Very interesting, very world sounding, because you're taking a little bit from this part of the world, a little bit from that part of the world. That's what I always thought world music was. I never thought that world music was just music from another part of the world. I thought it was, we're taking music from all over the world and blending it together. And so side 2 is where it's at on here. Side 1, though, not so much at all. So, I would give side 1 2 stars, if that, and side 2 like 4 stars. So blend it together, and you got 3 stars for Duck Rock from Malcolm McLaren. But he just has his name on it. I'm sure he financed it probably, and that's, in his goofy voice or whatever, doing a hoedown at the end of it or whatever. But, the rap part with the 2 DJs from New York, just takes me right back to listening to Magic 108 in St. Louis. Back in 84, when I was super into Prince, I would listen to our urban station in St. Louis for the first time, which was Magic 108, and I would listen to it all the time to hear Prince. Because like every 20 minutes they'd play Prince. And not just Purple Rain stuff or 1999. They played the older stuff. They were playing B-sides. They were playing 12-inch singles. So I was listening for that because I was super into Prince at the time and just wanted to hear all of it. And so Magic 108 was the station. And I'd never heard, an urban radio station. And urban is the name of the format. And so they would also play rap music. And that's what it was called. And it wasn't called, I don't think it was called hip-hop. It was called rap. And, and listening to all these groups like I'd never heard before, like UTFO with that whole Roxanne battle and Roxanne Shante and all that. That was pretty fun. You had like Grandmaster Flash was on all the time, and Houdini, Divine Sounds, What People Do for Money, Curtis Blow. It was just really, a different thing. But, here, me living in the Metro East as like a 10-year-old, 11-year-old, I was getting like access to like the streets of St. Louis and East St. Louis and, all these areas that, I was not familiar with at all. And that's kind of what rap was. It was like your little window into a different world. And it was so gritty and so street. And it was just, it was like I was right there at the peak of that, listening to that when it was all started. And then I really got disinterested in rap music when it started going more of like, we're just going to do record scratch. We're going to have some guy named Malcolm McLaren talking about Buffalo Gals going round the outside, whatever the hell that is. So I just completely lost interest in rap music. So, but I was really getting into it in like 83, 84. And then when it started getting like cliched and I'm on the mic and I'm here to say that, and whatever. I didn't care for Beastie Boys later on. No, not into the frat boy rap stuff. So, yeah, no, but in 83, 84, Yeah, and so the two DJs on here totally remind me of the two guys, and they had different shows. There were two guys on each one, it seemed like, but totally reminds me of Magic 108, where these guys would be on the phone. It was such a community thing. I'd never heard, I mean, the pop stations had like phone-ins and whatever, but they were nothing like Magic 108, where they were just like on the phone all the time and talking to all these people, and the two guys going off each other, and it was really cool to hear that and be exposed to. I'd never heard radio like that before. And so that part of this just brings me right back to that, the two guys, because they have these little radio interludes all throughout the album. So that's really cool too. But as far as Malcolm McLaren and his dorky delivery and he doesn't belong on the album. The album certainly should not be credited to him, in my opinion, but I get it. He probably paid for it. He probably made them have I want my name on it. I want the money. I'm organizing all of this and whatever. So I totally get it. But 3 stars, would have gotten 4, maybe even 5, if it wasn't actually for Malcolm McLaren. Do you remember the band Kissing the Pink? I definitely remember that band name, although I'd never really heard them before. They were not big in the United States at all, but I definitely remember Kissing the Pink, the name. You hear a name like that and it kind of stays in your mind. But yeah, they released their debut called Naked on May 27th, 1983, and I'd never heard this before, any songs from it. Check this out, and this is actually really great. All different types of styles in here. Some of it sounds very much like 1983. Some of it sounds like it could have been from a little bit later, so they were a little ahead of the curve on some things. They are from London. It features Nicholas Whitecross as the vocalist and Josephine Wells on saxophone. She also does some vocals as well. And a bunch of others, there's a lot of background vocals, but a lot of different styles on here. Starts off with The Last Film, and that's kind of this marching snare drum cadence thing with some nice melodies over the top of it, talking about the last film I ever see, or I'll ever see, or I ever saw, and then your mind starts wondering, everybody has that time. Everybody has their time to pass. What's going to be the last movie I ever see? What's going to be the last song I ever hear? And then you got to snap back and go, I got to listen to this album. So yeah, that happens. Track 1. That song also comes up again in a different version on the album. Frightened in France is this really kind of electronic, robot voice, Cylons effect on the vocal. Type of thing that really is completely different from the song you just heard. And they move into this completely other area. I mean, there's songs on here with this pulsating drum beat that sounds like it's from like a soundtrack or something like that. That's, you're in a movie and there's this pulsating rhythm going on and you're driving or whatever. There's that. There's just basic full-on pop songs with catchy choruses and nice music going on, nice melodies that are, get in the ear and stay there. Love Lasts Forever is kind of like that. There's Desert Song, which goes back to the synth kind of sound with the pulsating, beat going on. So there's a lot of different things that they're doing with their music. It's a very interesting album. It's very well done, very produced great. Not kind of ham-fisted, not, clunky, or, like some of the early 80s synth stuff can kind of sound kind of cold and clunky and uninspired. This does not. This is great. I'm so glad I got to hear this. And I'm definitely going to look for this. If I ever see it anywhere, I'll be picking this up. Kissing the Pink. They were later just known as KTP because Kissing the Pink is, I guess, a little bit of a controversial name. Even though the story is that it's about playing pool and with a really soft shot. That's Kissing the Pink. That's interesting because I don't remember any pink pool balls, and I don't remember, usually there's green felt, so I don't know where the pink comes in. Kissing the Pink is cunnilingus, for God's sakes. Let's all get real here. We're all adults. But yeah, so this is great. I'll definitely be picking this up, maybe check out some more for them. They're probably like one of those bands that get more commercial and more mainstreamed and more less interesting as albums go on, but maybe not. Who knows? Do you know? Let me know in the comments. You remember Kissing the Pink? Again, all I remembered was the name. I'm going to give this 4 stars and be checking this out again sometime. And like I said, if I ever see this, I will be picking up the debut album called Naked. It's another deep dive into a year and another Joe Walsh album, just like my last 2 deep dives into 1991 and 1992, which each of those featured a Joe Walsh album. So does 1983, and it was called You Bought It. You name it, a clever title for a fun album from Joe Walsh. Now, this album is much, much better than the ones from the early 90s. This one is not exactly classic James Gang type Joe Walsh, but it'll pass. It's listenable. Got some great tunes on here. Starts off with I Can Play That Rock and Roll. This is the one where he doesn't want to play disco. It's 1983. We can can the anti-disco stuff. Disco's kind of gone now, but we can play that rock and roll. Kind of a, one of those rock and roll type songs. They have rock and roll in the title, and it's about as good as any song that's like that. So, kind of starts off on an upbeat thing, but kind of, not exactly, just classic. But then you get Don Felder co-writing the next song called Here We Are. Also plays lead guitar on that, does a nice job on that song. That's a real kind of rock song. You're finally back to some actual rockin' Joe Walsh there. Next song after that, a little bit of a reggae tinge thing with some more Eagles helping out. You got Don Henley and Timothy B. Schmidt singing backup vocals on Here We Are Now. A little bit of a reggae tinged thing going on there. The Worry song is after that. Typical Joe Walsh type of humor, sort of in the it takes a worried man to write a worried song type of vein. He's worried about this and they're worried about that, and don't you worry about this, I'll worry about that. The song kind of goes into what's going to be some sort of maybe guitar solo or maybe a breakdown or something, and then nothing happens, and he's, I was worried that was going to happen. So it's actually kind of humorous. Then after that, ILBTs. The song where he sings, I love big tits. And he says it quite a bit. Now, for 1983, some dude like Joe Walsh, popular and a mainstream artist, having a song about, I love big tits. I love big tits for breakfast. I love big tits for lunch. And they come in pairs, and I like to watch them bounce, big tits. I mean, that was kind of a different type of thing. And I can see why people would love this song, especially people loving those big tits. But now it just kind of plays as something you probably would have heard on like an FM rock morning show or something like that with tits bleeped out, or maybe if it was in the later 90s, maybe they wouldn't bleep it out. Kind of thing that, you would hear on something like that by some anonymous band. Right now, it would only be funny if you automatically found the word tits funny, because the song itself isn't really that funny. It's just, oh my God, Joe Walsh got a song called I Love Big Tits. Kind of like the beer drinking, some kind of a dirty thing on your t-shirt kind of song, ending side one. So I was kind of actually surprised. As soon as I saw ILBTs, I'm like, is that going to be I Love It? Yeah, that's exactly what that's going to be. Makes no bones about it. Space Age Whiz Kids, I think, was one of the songs that was played on rock radio. It's another one of those songs, kind of like in the Cameo album, where he's talking about, like, kids wasting all their money at the arcade and putting the quarters in, and it's rotting their mind. They ought to maybe go outside instead of playing arcade games all day, playing that. It mentions the same two video games that the Cameo song does. And Donkey Kong. So yeah, I don't know, man. Come on. We don't need old rockin' dudes, complaining about what the kids are doing these days. It makes you sound kind of out of touch and like an old man yelling at clouds, man. These kids don't do what I used to do when I was young. They're doing something different. I don't like it. Not a good look, but yeah, you got great stuff mixed throughout this album. A song towards the end called Shadows. It's got some killer guitar on it. Kind of sounds like a Pink Floyd type of thing. I don't know. I guess David Gilmour's not guesting, but Joe Walsh trying to sound like he is. Great song, though. Some other cool stuff on here, like Class of 65, where he's kind of reminiscing, getting a little teary-eyed about, it being kind of removed at this point from his high school years. We've all been there, I'm sure. And, of course, it's got some cover song on here that does not belong. A cover of the old tune Love Letters. Love letters straight from your heart. Elvis Presley redid that one as well. So a theme from Island Weirdos, an instrumental ends it. I'm assuming that's the follow-up to theme from Boat Weirdos that was on the But Seriously album. But anyway, overall, it's not perfect. It's not awesome. It's a nice Joe Walsh album. It's better than the stuff in the 90s, not as good as the stuff in the 70s. It's from the 80s, so it makes total sense. I'm going to give it 3 stars. Joe Walsh, you bought it. You name it. What would you name this album? Leave it in the comments section. And no, I Love Big Tits doesn't count because that's just a song title. So it's the final day of May 1983, and Elton John is back. He is back with Bernie Taupin, as a matter of fact. Also a few members from the original Elton John band in the 1970s that did all the hits. So this is sort of considered kind of a comeback album for him. This is Too Low for Zero. And this is the one that features I'm Still Standing, and I guess that's why they call it the blues. Those were huge, huge videos, huge songs on the radio as well. I'm Still Standing, of course, got that really upbeat message, like I'm back, I'm still here. I forgot about you. I'm moving on with my life, like a true survivor. Got that little hat on that he wore in the video out on the beach. And I guess that's why they call it the blues. Time on My Hands could be time spent with you, containing one of the most narcissistic lines I've ever heard. While I'm away, cry in the night if it helps. Giving you permission to just cry all night. Thanks, Elton, or Bernie. So yeah, there you go. Too Low for Zero. Pretty much that's the highlights of the album, are the two singles. Kiss the Bride was a single as well, but I never really cared for that one. That's on side 2. But it starts off pretty okay. It starts off with a more of a, kind of a somber song. Cold as Christmas in the middle of the year. It's the middle of the year, it's 90-something degrees, but he's cold and the kids are on the phone and everything's sad and I think the mom's gone or dead or something like that. You got Religion. That's a song about, hey, religion's fine, and then you get a man, I guess, and then the religion goes away. And you got the title track, Too Low for Zero, another somber one. It's got really kind of a roller coaster of emotions here on side 1. It starts off really somber, then it's the I'm Still Standing, and then it's Too Low for Zero. So it's like this, sort of bipolar experience on side 1. Side 2 is where the album just kind of like drifts off into nothing. A song called Crystal, that's all this synthy keyboard kind of stuff on here. It ends with, 2 kind of forgettable tracks as well. But it does have a song on side 2 that is definitely memorable for all the wrong reasons. And that is a song called Whipping Boy. And it's all about Elton being in love with this underage person, and I don't know if it ever states if it's a guy or a girl or whatever, but it doesn't matter. They're underage. He doesn't care. You're so dirty, and I love it, and you're way too young for me, but hey, San Quentin, here I come. Woo! I mean, he literally says, San Quentin, here I come. But he's not going to be your whipping boy, though. So just know that. Why do we need songs like that? Who is championing these songs about these underage sex affairs? That is a trend that I am glad is gone, for real. I mean, I didn't like that stuff when it was new. I thought it was awkward and like, ugh. Then, but I guess a lot of people were okay with it. I mean, artists like Elton John and hundreds of others felt okay to make songs about it and put it on albums. So I guess a lot of people didn't really think it was a problem. But yeah, skip over that. You can pretty much skip over a lot of this. I think for this part of Elton's career, a lot of us just need the 80s greatest hits and we're good to go with the singles, maybe a couple scattered album tracks here and there. My personal copy of this, somebody decided to write in pen, I don't know if how well that shows up, but decided to write Elton John. I'm looking at that, I'm like, is this signed? Is that his signature? I looked up his signature. That is definitely not his signature. Somebody just wrote Elton John on it, and then if that's not enough, wrote Willie Nelson under here. What? Willie Nelson? People are stupid. Why the hell would you write on an album cover anyway? But especially write Willie Nelson and Elton John. It says Elton John right there. We don't need Elton. Oh, I better write Elton John on here. Elton John. Anyway, Too Low for Zero. It's got 2 great singles on it. I'm going to give it 3 stars. Now, the previous video was one of the first times I mentioned in the 1983 series that this album is not for everyone. That was the Golden Palominos, and here comes another one like that. It is Mark Stewart and Mafia and Learning to Cope with Cowardice. This was released in May of '83, and it really does not sound like that. It sounds more like May of 1993. This is some really early industrial type experimental tape manipulation, distortion, just kind of way out kind of stuff. It is interesting though. It's the kind of thing that I think it's more to be appreciated than necessarily enjoyed at this point. The thing you have to do when you're listening to this is just keep reminding yourself this is 1983 when this was going on. And this was the kind of music that reportedly influenced like Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, Massive Attack, those bands like that in the 90s that were doing this kind of stuff. I guess Nine Inch Nails actually started in the late 80s, but you get the point. This is 1983, okay? This is not 1988. So this is really early for this kind of stuff, and it takes a lot of different directions. This is really interesting to listen to. Again, not for everyone, though, and I don't know how much it's really enjoyed or whatever, but there are some really enjoyable moments on here. The very first track is the title track, and it really sets the tone with the manipulation, and stuff like that. And like I said, distortion, basic drum beats going on in the background. You get into different types of music that goes along with this. Can you imagine industrial reggae? Okay, well, you don't have to. You can hear it on the song The Paranoia of Power. That's on side 2. Reggae, industrial reggae going on. So there's a little bit of a vibe on that. You got a little bit of Mexican guitar stuff earlier on in a couple of tracks. You got some dub stuff, and it all goes under this noisy, like I said, industrial type of sound. It's the kind of thing that it's hard to describe. You just kind of have to hear it. Some of the lyrics are really interesting as well, a little ahead of their time. I really like the track To Have the Vision, again towards the end. 'Tis a pity to have the vision, but not the conviction. Yes, it is. It is a pity to have that. And when you get older and older, you get more and more like that. Yeah, I have all these ideas. I have all this, wonderful stuff I want to do. Yeah, I'll get to that later. I don't have the willpower anymore. I don't have the... either the audacity or the ambition to pull that off these days. Totally relatable. But 4 stars for Mark Stewart and Mafia. This album is very interesting. Very interesting, I'll say that. Again, not for everyone, and definitely the type of thing that, you just have to keep reminding yourself it's 1983. More to be appreciated for that. Okay, wrapping up the month of May on an note. On the 31st of May, 1983, Agnetha Faltskog released Wrap Your Arms Around Me. Now, Agnetha is one of the A's from ABBA, if you didn't know that. Her and Anna Frida were the female voices, and they both had solo albums out right around the same time. In fact, she has already released several, but this was the one that kind of got the most attention, at least in the United States, and even that attention wasn't a huge amount. I think Anna Frida's I Know There's Something Going On was much bigger than this. You listen to this album and you realize how important Ben and Bjorn were to the ABBA sound. The production, the arrangement, the whole feel of, those two geniuses in the studio. They had that whole sound that made their voices sound so choral and everything, and they really had the magic of ABBA, to quote a K-Tel album title. I really wanted to like this because I really like ABBA, at least their earlier stuff. They start getting a little schmaltzy there towards the end of the last couple albums on the original ABBA run. But I really like ABBA. I liked them as a little kid, and still love their, like I said, like their first, few albums. And really wanted to like this. One reason is because I have it, and I've had it for all these years, and I think I've listened to it maybe three times now that I've listened to it again. And I can see why I've kind of just kept it on the shelf and never played it. It's just really generic love songs, soft rock. There's no magic here. There's no ABBA here. There's nothing that reaches out and grabs you, with the exception of one song, Can't Shake Loose. That was the single. Didn't do extremely well on the charts in the U.S. I think it got into the 20s or something. But the radio station I was listening to at the time, KWK 106, played it quite a bit, and it was a hit here, and I liked it. But nothing else on this album sounds like that song. That song has a real nice 80s pop feel to it. It's got an electric guitar in it. She's really belting out parts of it, and I really wish the rest of the album would be more in that style, but it's not. That song, Can't Shake Loose, sounds like it's from a completely different project. It doesn't sound the same at all. Written by Russ Ballard, who also wrote I Know There's Something Going On, as well as God Gave Rock and Roll to You, and some other songs as well. But yeah, I wish the rest of it songs that the rest don't though. They're these kind of really generic, passive kind of love songs. She doesn't really do too much with her voice. At least her producer doesn't command very much from her. There's a couple of little 60s popish kind of flourishes, a little bit of, show tune vibe on some of them, but nothing really great on here. And like I said, I really wanted to like this album, but I really just don't get very much from this at all. And of course, it's in near mint condition, and it's that whole thing where if it's something I'm never going to play, of course I've got an excellent copy of it. But yeah, so yeah, can't really wanted to like this. Really wanted to be like, oh man, Agnetha, she proved that she doesn't need the other three in ABBA. She really branched out, and wow, this is just great. Her voice is just sensational. And that is not the case. Can't Shake Loose is basically the song. And I would say you can just get the 45, but the 45 cuts like a minute and a half out of the song. So you want to get the album version. But so yeah, Wrap Your Arms Around Me from Agnetha Faltskog is only going to get 2 stars from me, and I am not, happy to do that. I really wanted to like this a lot more, but I gotta keep it real. So yeah, May ends on quite the downer note, but it's okay. June is coming up next, and I will talk about albums from the Talking Heads, also Grand Funk, America, Midnight Star, No Parking on the Dance Floor, and more. So hopefully you will join me for that video, and we will continue this deep dive into the albums of 1983 chronologically. I'm Robert Fithen, and thank you so much for continuing with me on this quest to find great albums from 1983.